So now that we understand the basics of working with the MXM mode materials, let's go ahead and take a deeper look at working with the embedded character type materials. So to begin with, I'm just going to go ahead and create a simple ground plane that we can apply a wood floor to. I'm just going to do something like so. And I'm kind of a stickler for making sure the front side of faces is facing the right way. So I'm just going to say reverse faces to make sure that that is the front. And we're going to apply a wood floor material to this plane. So I'm going to go to Window, Materials, and I'm just going to make sure that I navigate to my wood library here. And I'm just going to pick a wood floor material. And I think I'm going to go ahead and just choose this first wood floor and apply it like so. Now this is a SketchUp material. There are no associated Maxwell values with this particular material. However, as soon as we open up the Maxwell Scene Manager and we go to the Material tab, you'll see that we have the ability to edit the properties of this wood floor material just like we could edit any of the other ones. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin to edit this. Now the first thing I want to do here is I want to use this little render preview to get a better idea of what exactly this currently looks like. Now you'll notice that we have many different scenes that we can choose. This is stage 1, but I'm going to go ahead and choose the floor scene, and that's just going to give me a better representation of what exactly it is that we're looking for. I can also choose the target sample level, and I might choose a slightly higher sample level for this so that we can get a better idea of what we're looking at. Now, there are a number of tabs within this character editor, but the thing that we want to do first here is we want to come down from the type, and we want to change the type from automatic to something like lacquer. Now, lacquer is specifically designed for wood surfaces, and you'll notice that we have many different character types. I'm not going to go through all the different character types because you can find out information about those in the manual. I'm just going to use this one as a demonstration of how the interface works, and then you can research which one would be appropriate for your needs in the manual. So I'm going to choose from lacquer, I'm going to choose the rubbed finish. I could choose any of these others I wanted to, but I like the rubbed finish for this. And right off the bat, if I do a preview render, you're going to see that what we end up with looks a lot more like a wood floor. But we can do better than that. If I come over here, you can see that aside from this color tab, which allows us to use a color picker, we also have a texture tab. And in order to see this a little better, I'm just going to go ahead and just scroll this down a bit so that we can see what we've got here. You can see that this is allowing us to work with a very simplified version of a image editing application. We have the saturation, brightness, and contrast sliders that we can adjust here to change this image to whatever we like it to be. We can also adjust the minimum and max, and we can invert the image like so. And we can also interpolate, which can sometimes be useful for low quality JPEGs and whatnot like that. Now, right now the source is linked to application. The other option here is to use a specific texture from outside of SketchUp. But for this, we're just going to use the link to application. If we hover over this, we can begin to work with the texture controls. And then we could just do things like scale this, we can tile it in different ways. But generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with the way that SketchUp's going to work with this because this is a seamlessly tileable texture, so I'm not going to mess with this too much. But what I do want to do now is come over to the fourth icon, which is our bump. And it has a lot of the same things. Again, we have saturation, which is currently set to -100, which means it's pulled all the color out of that image that we see right there. We can also change the brightness and contrast, and I am going to change the contrast on this. I want to get a lot more contrast. And I can also do things like invert. So if I wanted to invert this and then have the darker areas be lighter and the lighter areas be darker, I could adjust the minimum and max if I wanted to get something that would be a little bit more useful for what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. Because basically, I want a bump, but I want a bump that's not going to be dealing with the extremes. So I think, there we go. Something like so is probably going to be pretty good. Right now it's set to the mode of bump mapping. We can also choose normal mapping if we have a normal map, which again we would have to load from someplace else because we could not adjust this to be a normal map. And then we have displacement on the fly and displacement pre-tessellated. These are things that you're probably going to want to look at in the manual because they are very resource intensive, and generally speaking, I don't recommend you use them for doing the type of work that we're going to be doing with this Fire render engine. So primarily we're going to stick with either bumping or normal mapping, and for these embedded character types where we're editing the default materials in SketchUp, bump is probably going to do you best. So just use this to adjust the way that you want your bump to be in the different image editing functions. Again, S for saturation, B for brightness, C for contrast, minimum and maximum, and then just get this to a place where it's going to give you the result you're looking for. And then at that point, you can adjust the bump strength. So I'm probably going to start with the bump at somewhere around 10%, and I'm going to do a preview render of that. And I'm going to say, it doesn't look quite as strong as I'd like it to, so maybe I'll up the bump. And there we go. Now we're starting to see that. That's probably a bit more than I'd like, so maybe we'll try someplace around 20. Try that again. All right, so that's looking much, much better. Now I'm beginning to see the types of things that I want to see. Maybe I might want to come back to my first tab, which is the character tab, and change it from rubbed to maybe semi-gloss and see how that looks. All right, so that's a little bit more in line with what I was looking for. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how to use this embedded character type interface to work with the different character types, to work with the texture, as well as the bump parameters. Now, once you have all those things set up, you can easily do a fire preview of the whole scene. I'm going to change it from sky dome to physical sky, turn on the sun, and we're not going to have the ground plane mode set to application by default. The reason why is because this plane that we put here, even though there is no technical real ground plane, when we create that ground plane and we create this, those two things are going to be overlapping as far as Maxwell is concerned. So what I want to do is I want to come over here to this context button here, and I want to set the decimal places to something like 3. And that'll give me the ability of working with a much finer amount of the diameter and elevation. So I'm just going to go ahead and set these for 3. I find that I like to use a lot more than 0 decimal places, so I'm just going to set those for 3. And I'm going to set the diameter for, we'll leave it at 1,000, but I'm going to set the elevation for something like negative 0.001, like so. And that will just make sure that our ground plane and our wood floor are not occupying the exact same space. And this is something that you have to be aware of when you're using this ground plane. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say fire, and I'm going to say fire enable. And now we've got our wood floor. So if I just go ahead and zoom in on this wood floor, we'll be able to see what we're getting much better. So I'm just going to select that, zoom in like so. And you can see we've got a nice wood floor. It looks like a wood floor. It's got a little bump texture. It's got a little glossiness from that lacquer. And basically, more or less, you can do that to any SketchUp material that you find within your SketchUp libraries. You can also, now that you've embedded that information into that SketchUp material, you can save that back out as a new SketchUp material, and it will always retain that information of the Maxwell parameters. So you can set up all of your wood floors, you can set up all of your carpets, you can set up any object or any material that you're going to use over and over again through the typical SketchUp libraries, because those embedded Maxwell properties of the plugin will always remain the same once you've set them and then saved out the material or saved out the component with those parameters embedded into them. This is the strength of the embedded character type, and it's very different from the MXM because the MXM is external to SketchUp. The embedded type is internal to SketchUp. It's actually part of that SketchUp material definition.